He spat on stages, he cursed at crowds. He was punk's most dangerous voice, the man parents warned their kids about. But here's the shocker. Behind Johnny Rotten's sneer and chaos lived a secret playlist that would blow your mind. 6 musicians, so unexpected, so strange, they completely rewrote what punk could be. Today we peel back the spikes and spit to reveal the sounds that truly shaped Johnny Rotten. And trust me, number one will leave you speechless. He spat on stages, he cursed at crowds, he terrified parents and became the sneering face of punk rebellion. Johnny Rotten wasn't just a frontman, and he was the warning label stuck on a whole generation. But here's the twist. The man who screamed no future was secretly building his sound from some of the strangest, smartest, and most unlikely influences in music history. Welcome to Offstage Tales. Today, we're cracking open Johnny Rotten's hidden record collection, 6 musicians who shaped punk's most infamous voice. Forget what you think you know, because these choices will flip your idea of punk upside down. And we start with number 6, an influence that makes perfect sense the moment you hear it, Captain Beefheart. Rotten's obsession with the avant-garde blues sorcerer wasn't just about weird sounds. It was about finding someone who refused to play the industry's game at all. The story goes back to the mid-1970s, when Rotten first got his hands on Beefheart's legendary Trout Mask replica. According to former Sex Pistols bassist Glenn Matlock, Rotten played that record on repeat, telling anyone within earshot, "This is real rebellion, not just breaking rules, destroying them." What hooked him wasn't only the chaos of Beefheart's rhythms or the jagged melodies, it was the purity. While most bands were chasing radio play, Beefheart was creating what Rotten called art in its own universe, uncompromising, untouchable, and almost alien. In a 1977 interview, Rotten dropped the stage persona for a moment of rare sincerity. Don Van Vliet understood that rebellion isn't about spitting at expectations, it's about annihilating them completely. That's Beefheart's real name, and the fact that Rotten used it showed just how deep the respect ran. You can hear the influence in Rotten's later work with Public Image Limited, the unpredictable rhythms, the jagged vocals, the refusal to be comfortable. Whenever critics called Beefheart unlistenable, Rotten fired back. If it's easy to digest, it isn't challenging anything. For Johnny Rotten, Captain Beefheart wasn't just an influence. He was a blueprint for absolute artistic freedom, proof that rebellion could be intellectual, not just loud. At number 5, Johnny Rotten's record shelf takes a haunting turn, straight into the world of Scott Walker. Now, for most people, Walker was the dreamy baritone of the Walker Brothers, a crooner with pop hits that made teenage hearts melt. But that wasn't the Scott Walker Rotten admired. No, what pulled him in was the second act, the transformation. Walker abandoned stardom, shattered his own commercial success, and drifted into some of the darkest, most experimental music ever pressed to vinyl. The obsession reportedly began around 1976, when Rotten stumbled across Walker's solo records in a London shop. Sex Pistols manager Malcolm McLaren later recalled how mesmerized Rotten became, saying, "He told me, Scott Walker went from teen idol to artistic madman. That's real punk, destroying your own success to find something true." For Rotten, it wasn't about the smooth pop melodies, it was about the fearless evolution. Walker's later work, dense orchestration, chilling atmospheres, lyrics dripping with dread, became what Rotten called beautiful terror. Songs that didn't just entertain, but disturbed, unsettled, and reached emotions ordinary music never touched. In a 1978 interview, Rotten put it bluntly, "Scott Walker taught me rebellion means walking away from what makes you popular. That's the hardest road of all." And it wasn't just admiration from a distance. Rotten studied him. Bandmates from Public Image Limited recalled him analyzing Walker's theatrical delivery, experimenting with vocal techniques that stretched from whispers to wails. You can hear it in Pyle's long, dramatic arrangements. Echoes of Walker's orchestral nightmares filtered through Rotten's raw edge. Critics often mocked Walker for throwing away his fan base, but Rotten defended him every time. He chose honesty over easy money, he'd argue, and that's the bravest thing any musician can do. For Johnny Rotten, Scott Walker represented more than music. He embodied transformation, proof that true artists aren't defined by their hits, but by their willingness to burn them down in pursuit of something real. At number 4, Johnny Rotten's musical journey takes us far from London's spit-soaked stages, straight into the smoky, echoing soundscapes of Jamaica, his unlikely idol, the eccentric genius of dub, Lee Scratch Perry. Now, most people saw reggae as political, rebellious in its own right, but what fascinated Rotten wasn't the message, it was the mad science behind Perry's sound. He didn't just produce records, he treated the studio like a laboratory. Tapes rewound, echoes stretched into infinity, rhythms collapsing into controlled chaos. Music wasn't just played, it was a rearranged reality. Rotten first heard Perry's dub experiments at a friend's Notting Hill flat. According to journalist Caroline Kuhn, he froze, then muttered, "This man is turning music inside out. He's not making records, he's making new worlds." While other producers polished songs for radio, Perry was chasing something stranger. Rotten described it as madness that somehow makes sense once you stop trying to understand it. Silence became as powerful as noise. Space was as important as rhythm. To a punk anarchist searching for sonic rebellion, this wasn't just music, it was liberation. By 1979, Rotten was openly defending Perry against critics who dismissed his work as indulgent. "Scratch proves the best art comes from the edge of sanity," he told Black Music Magazine, and you can hear it. In Public Image Limited's experimental phases, where dub's fingerprints are everywhere, reverb-heavy bass lines, cavernous space, echoes that turn songs into haunted landscapes. Rotten had learned from Perry that rebellion wasn't only about aggression, sometimes it was about distortion, deconstruction, and the audacity to let sound breathe. More than anything, Rotten saw Perry as a fellow outsider, someone who refused to obey either reggae's rules or punk's. "We're both outsiders who won't play by anyone's book," Rotten explained. For him, Lee Scratch Perry was proof that true genius often looked like madness, and that rebellion could be built not just with guitars and rage, but with echo chambers and silence. Number 3 on Rotten's list is a curveball so wild it stuns even hardcore punk historians. Van der Graaf Generator, prog rock, yes, the genre punk was supposed to despise, the sworn enemy of three-chord anarchy. But Rotten wasn't interested in easy tribal lines. What he heard in Van der Graaf Generator wasn't pompous solos or indulgent theatrics. He heard raw survival screaming through sophistication. The revelation came in 1975 at a house party when someone dropped the needle on their album, Pawn Hearts. The room may have been noisy, but according to Malcolm McLaren, Rotten just froze. Peter Hamill's voice cut through the chaos like a scream at the edge of existence. Later, Rotten described it. "That man sings like his life depends on it. That's punk, but it's draped over these massive, intricate landscapes." While the other prog bands were flexing technical muscles, Van der Graaf Generator used complexity as a weapon. Their symphonic storms weren't about showing off, they were about amplifying emotion. Rotten called it beautiful violence, anger transformed into art. In interviews, he praised Hamill's theatrical delivery. "Peter Hamill taught me you can be sophisticated and still completely raw," he told Melody Maker in 1978. That lesson bled into Rotten's own stagecraft. The dramatic pauses, the sudden shrieks, the willingness to stretch songs beyond punk's strict 3-minute bursts. Bandmates remember him studying Hamill's phrasing, even dissecting how emotion could be heightened, not dulled, by complex arrangements. To Rotten, intelligence wasn't a betrayal of punk, it was a sharpened blade. Clever music isn't weaker, he argued, it's more dangerous, because it knows exactly where to strike. For Johnny, Rotten Van der Graaf Generator shattered the false wall between primal and intellectual. They proved you could be ferocious, sophisticated, and terrifyingly honest, all at once. At number 2, Johnny Rotten's playlist takes yet another sharp left turn, this time to the quiet, haunted voice of Neil Young. On the surface, they couldn't be further apart. Rotten was the snarling face of punk chaos. Young was the folk rock poet of wide open fields. But what Rotten saw in Neil Young had nothing to do with style and everything to do with courage. The story goes back to 1976, before Rotten was famous. A friend slipped him a copy of Tonight's the Night, Young's bleak, grief-soaked album. Most listeners found it too raw, too broken. Rotten, though, was transfixed. According to guitarist Steve Jones, Rotten played it obsessively, muttering, "This guy doesn't care if anyone likes it, he just follows where it takes him." That was the hook, Young's refusal to repeat himself. While other big names recycled their formulas, Young kept shifting. Folk, grunge, noise rock, even electronic experiments. Each turn baffled critics, but Rotten recognized the rebellion in it. Neil Young changes direction every time people think they've got him figured out, he told Rolling Stone in 1980. That's real bravery. The lesson seeped deep into Rotten's DNA. When he broke away from the Sex Pistols and built Public Image Limited, critics screamed betrayal. But Rotten pointed straight to Neil Young as his compass. Don't give them what they expect. Don't sell reunion tours for easy money. Create because you must, not because the market demands it. He even defended Young's most divisive career moves, calling them the hardest kind of rebellion, rebelling against your own success. For Rotten, Neil Young was living proof that artistic integrity wasn't about spikes and sneers, it was about risk, about burning bridges to stay true to yourself, about keeping audiences on edge, even if it cost you their applause. And in that, punk and folk met on the same roads, not through sound, but through uncompromising spirit. And finally, at number one, the most haunting, the most unexpected, and the most important influence of all, Nico. Long before Rotten was snarling at cameras, he was a teenager digging through record shops. One day in 1974, he pulled out an album with a cold, ghostly cover, The Marble Index. He dropped the needle and was never the same. This wasn't the Nico of Velvet Underground fame, not the glamorous singer draped in Warhol's circle. This was something darker. Her voice floated like a funeral hymn, detached yet devastating. Rotten later confessed to friends, she sings like she's already dead, but somehow more alive than anyone else. It's the most honest sound I've ever heard. What gripped him wasn't beauty, it was fearlessness. While other singers tried to win hearts, Nico carved an ice-cold universe of her own. No apologies, no compromises, no desire for approval. Rotten called it beautiful isolation, music that didn't ask you to like it, but demanded you confront it. According to biographer John Savage, Rotten became obsessed. He studied her phrasing, her unflinching delivery. Friends recalled him saying Nico proved that true art wasn't about pleasing anyone. It was about standing alone, even if it terrified the room. He defended her constantly, especially against critics who dismissed her as difficult or unmarketable. To Rotten, that was the point. She never tried to be likable. She never softened her edges. That's the purest rebellion of all. Nico showed him that music could be colder than steel, lonelier than silence, and yet burn with brutal honesty. She wasn't just an influence. She was a revelation. And with that, the picture of Johnny Rotten changes forever. Punk's angriest voice wasn't built on chaos alone. It was sculpted from Beefheart's wildness, Walker's terror, Perry's madness, Vandergraaf's sophistication, Young's courage, and Nico's unflinching darkness. The man who screamed, "No future," carried one of the strangest, richest record collections in rock. And maybe that's the ultimate truth about rebellion. It doesn't come from noise or chaos or even anger. It comes from refusing to be ordinary. So tell me, which influence shocked you the most? And there it is. The secret playlist of punk's angriest voice. Not a wall of safety pins and snarls, but a cathedral of strange influences stitched together from places no one expected. Johnny Rotten, the man who once spat at cameras and taunted royalty, was also the boy in a bedroom, headphones on, digging through sounds that didn't belong, chasing voices that scared more than they soothed. To him, rebellion was never just noise. It was discovery. It was the courage to search in the shadows where no one else was looking. Think about it. Captain Beefheart, building a universe no industry could contain. Scott Walker, burning down his own fame to chase art's darkest corners. Lee Scratch Perry, bending sound until it defied gravity. Vandergraaf generator, screaming emotion through symphonic storms. Neil Young, shredding his own formulas before they could trap him. And Nico, singing like the ghost of truth itself, untouchable, eternal. Rotten didn't just admire these artists, he absorbed them, he let them shape his DNA, and in turn he reshaped punk. He proved that rebellion could be more than chaos. It could be intelligent, calculated, and unflinching. It could be terrifying in its honesty. And maybe that's why Johnny Rotten still matters. Not because of one album, one band, or one scandal, but because he showed us something bigger, that real rebels don't just fight the system, they fight themselves. They resist the comfort of repeating what works. They risk failure for evolution. They destroy their own success to build something truer. So the next time you hear the sneer of no future, remember, behind it was a record player spinning with sounds stranger, richer, and braver than anyone expected. Punk wasn't just three chords in anger. It was Nico's ice, Young's fire, Perry's echo, Walker's nightmares, Beefheart's chaos, and Hamill's scream, all colliding into something new. And now I'll throw it back to you. Which of Rotten's hidden influences shocked you most? Which one will you go and listen to tonight? Drop it in the comments. And if this story flipped how you see punk, hit like, share it with a music lover who thinks they know Johnny Rotten, and subscribe to Offstage Tales, where the myths crack open and the music speaks for itself. Because sometimes the greatest rebellion isn't shouting louder, it's daring to listen deeper.